Good afternoon, Fescarma, everyone, and welcome to today's Learning and Families Committee. I think largely we all know each other. Just like to welcome Fiona Waddle to the committee today. If there's any questions on the Gaelic paper, then Fiona will do her best to answer them. And we've kind of promoted Fiona Mackay to the top table today just because we have the verbal update on our ASN transformation, and I think it's important that Fiona's here to do that. The reason we've put the verbal report in is that we make no apologies in administration as it being a big focus, and that is really important, but we also understand that it's not just the administration. There's plenty of other elected members here who also have a passion in this area, and it's important that we work together and share this, and we're subject to appropriate legitimate scrutiny. So that's why that's there. It's a big deal, and it's important that we keep it on the agenda, as it were, both literally and metaphorically. However, at this point, I will ask elected members if they've any declarations of interest, please. If there are none, we will move on to minutes of the meeting. There's two there, there's Learning and Families and there's the last executive subcommittee as well. If there are any comments or any matters arising from that, then let's hear them now, please. Otherwise, we'll ask Scott for apologies and whatnot at this point, please.
Thanks, convener. We've got apologies from Provost McDade. We have a substitution from Councillor Colin Stewart. There's no other apologies in terms of those members online, if they can just confirm that they're present. So I think we have Councillor Freshwater.
Present, thank you.
And Councillor Kogali.
Yes, here.
And I think we also have Laura Jean Grant online.
Present.
Right, I think that's everyone else, convener. Oh, and Councillor Shire's apologies as well.
Present.
Thank you, Scott. Given that I've already got the order slightly mixed up there, it's probably important to just formally agree the minutes at this point, if that's okay. Can we formally agree the minutes of the meetings? Thank you very much. And I know that Councillor Shires is online because you're a little bit under the weather, so I hope you get better soon. Outstanding business statement, please, Scott. If there's anything that needs to be done, let's do it now, please.
Thanks, convener. I think the outstanding business statement is there for members to see, and there are two actions in relation to both being complete. So I think it's really just for members to note the statement, and we'll remove the completed actions.
Any comment on that? Is that acceptable to elected members? Thank you very much. We'll move on to the first substantial item of the day, as previously discussed, which is our ASN transformation programme verbal update. And Fiona, please.
Good afternoon. I've come today to report on 5 of the projects and work within the work streams of the ASN transformation. The first of that, which is one that probably most elected members will have heard most about over the last while, is the ISP expansion, where we are looking to establish ISP at Perth High School, at Kinross High School and at Viewlands Primary School. And at this point in time, we're in the throes of the statutory consultation to take that forward. The statutory the public engagement part of the statutory consultation has been completed, and a number of councillors attended some of the public meetings that we had to support that. Those public meetings were very well represented and were helpful in terms of generating some points and areas that will help us in terms of the development of work to establish the provisions. The next stage of the consultation for those 2 schools is that Education Scotland are now completing a review and their own research into what is required within the schools and whether the educational benefits statement is sufficient for them to recommend that we do continue with taking that forward. We will complete that. They will complete that within 3 weeks. and then we will provide a report that will become published in due course for comment from the public before we then complete the report to this committee with the recommendations from all of that activity. We're currently as I said earlier, we have a statutory consultation also underway for Viewlands Primary School. That consultation is still in the public phase, the public engagement phase, although we have completed the public meeting and the staff consultation work, and yesterday also completed the consultation with the young people within the school. So all of that's generating some really helpful information that will enable us to take this forward. Throughout all of those consultations, we also engaged with parent councils in the case of Kinross High School's consultation as well, also with the Kinross partnership, so that enabled us to have a wider engagement than we have there. The next phase in terms of this work will be about taking forward statutory consultations or taking forward an options appraisal to this committee to ask that we take forward a statutory consultation around the Community School of Auchterarder area and the St John's Academy catchment as well. That will come to the committee at the end of August. Looking at moving on to some of the other areas of work, we're also been progressing work around inclusive environments. As many of our primary schools, our mainstream primary schools, are supporting children with complex needs in the primary 1 to primary 3 stages, and those needs we know they're becoming more complex as we go forward. To promote regulation and readiness to learn of these children, the schools have been provided with resources to support the sensory needs of the children and to create quiet, calming spaces for them to be able to support their own self-regulation. We're supporting that by using budget motion funding that we were allocated for 24-25, and that's allowed us to buy key resources such as blackout tents with lights and accessories, weighted blankets, body socks, and divider panels that schools can use to create smaller spaces within their classrooms to enable children and young people to pick and choose where they feel it's best for them at that particular time to enable their self-regulation. So a lot of activity has happened in terms of providing resources out to schools. In addition, the project, the Inclusive Environments Project, has also worked with Call Scotland, which is an organisation funded by Scottish Government but run by Edinburgh University, to support children in all of our intensive support provisions to access toolkits of IT devices to support their communication needs. And that again enables them to have better, more effective communication within their learning environments and reduces dysregulation, supporting communication. Some of our next steps in terms of the inclusive environments work will be around providing further learning about the use of sensory resources to increase further support around our children at the early years of primary schools, but also to broaden that out to think about where that might also benefit young people at different stages within their school environments. The other piece of work that will be coming forward for next year is to look at our secondary environments and to think about how we continue to support them, the secondary schools, in terms of that bit of creating quiet and calming spaces to take it forward. Some of our other work has been around improving data-led decision making and looking at how we have more robust and robust data within our systems that we can use centrally in terms of looking at resourcing and interventions, but also that schools can use for themselves to take forward their own organisation of resourcing, of interventions, of planning for our children and young people. So to take that forward, where we know that what we need to do is increase the effectiveness and the appropriateness of the data that's inputted to systems. We all know that systems or data is only as good as what's been uploaded to systems in the first place. So we are working with our schools to ensure that they've got the right guidance and support to be able to know how to input information and what information to take forward. And then we're also developing a Power BI dashboard, which will allow each of our schools to be able to access their data in a way that will best support them in terms of their forward planning. We're supporting all of that with some auditing of the data that goes into our systems to be able to look at any further training needs that we think will come forward. The fourth project that I was looking to provide some information on was around our post-school transitions. We know that as our children and young people come through the system, that one of the key points for them is that jump on from secondary schools into the world of training and work. And therefore, we're working with our partners in the Health and Social Care Partnership to look at how we can best support that and make sure it's as smooth a transition as possible. To take that forward, we're working with a national project that has developed an app to support the young people themselves and their families in terms of understanding how to navigate the system, because quite often getting access to the right information can be really challenging for families. Therefore, this app has been developed to look to do that. It will have the capacity to be adapted to provide localised information, so that although it's a national development, it will have a local platform as well to be able to ensure that stays attuned to Perth and Kinross. And my final update was to talk about staffing. We give a commitment to look at the allocations of our pupil support assistants, and indeed to make the roles of that provide support within primary schools more streamlined. We have worked so far and completed a review of the allocations model for our pupil support assistants to support it to be more aligned to the needs that are within schools themselves. That will take into account then the size of the school role, the deprivation within the school, and the spread of children who are supported at level 2 and level 3 within our staged intervention framework. And that staged intervention framework and the child's planning system that we currently have is in the early stages of implementation. We are only a year in. Therefore, we recognise that a further year is going to be needed to be able to strengthen, again, the data within the system. So that comes back to that important part that I mentioned earlier about needing to ensure that our data is as robust and accurate as possible. So therefore, although we've agreed the allocation model that we'll use to take forward, our schools are in agreement that it would be preferable to wait for a further year before we implement that. So we are currently rolling that forward and looking at implementation of the new allocations model from August 2026, which allows our schools to ensure that their data is as accurate as possible, as that will contribute to how we take that forward. In the meantime, what we are also undertaking, so that when we allocate for August 2026, we allocate for a single support post that allows us to streamline the different posts that we currently have, which are paid at GE3, and there is one post group that we currently pay at GE2, which we're looking to align to have all of the support provided at the same grade of GE3 within our schools from August 2026. So a bit of an update in terms of some of the work that's already done, but also flagging up some things that are still to come. And my final bit that I would just mention is that the Scrutiny and Performance Committee are in the process of finalising their review of ASN and specific aspects of it, and that will be coming forward very soon. And I think that will be an area that will help us in terms of look at further actions within the ASN transformation work next year. But looking forward to reviewing that at committee next week.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Very much appreciated. We'll invite questions. There's already a couple coming in. So, Councillor Freshwater, please.
Thanks very much, convener, and thanks for the update. Just to say, as an opening comment, I attended the session, as I know you did, convener, and a number of other members of the committee attended the Kinross High session a few weeks ago, and I thought it was a brilliant session. It's obviously a very passionate subject. The venue was full, and obviously a lot of comments, both from people very supportive, but also some concerns. But I think overall this is really, really good news to see this work coming out. I think one of the particular things, and this is getting onto my question, was that one of the questions that was asked at the session in Kinross was around the timescales, and I just wondered, in terms of this committee, will there be a paper coming forward that will look at the kind of timescales of the rollout of the provision, and also obviously the associated budgets, because obviously there's also the interim phase when they put the service in preliminarily or provisionally, sorry, and then obviously it becomes a full-time service. And obviously that was a question that came up locally. It was just to ask if that will be put forward in a paper for this committee in terms of the Kinross and the wider rollout. Thanks very much.
No problem at all, Councillor Freshwater. Thanks for that question. It was a really good evening, actually. I think it was, yeah, very informative. There will be a paper. I'm not quite sure about the timescale, so I'm going to ask Fiona to confirm that.
Thanks.
That will come forward to the November committee.
Thank you, Fiona.
Perfect. Thank you.
No worries at all. Thank you. Bailey Ahern, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Fiona, for that. There's really good work there. I look forward to seeing the report and what happens in the future. My question is with regards to transition, but going into nursery and P1, and I've had a couple of families contact us regarding the changes from an HST side into a single diagnosis, and the concerns they've got that going into school, either at nursery or P1, that they're not going to receive the same support as if they had a diagnosis. And what are you doing to reassure those parents and those families of children coming into the education system, if you like, that it's not a barrier to support?
Thank you, Bailey Ahern. David.
So yeah, I mean that is a live concern, Bailey Ahern, that we are engaging with NHS about, and we're actually engaging on it at a whole Tayside level. So there's work undergoing and underway. We've actually worked with NHS about our approach to dealing with neurodiversity and the partnerships that we have. I think it would be fair to say that there's still a wee bit of distance to go with NHS colleagues in terms of that piece of assessment and diagnosis, which is obviously a real cause for concern with families. But it's been dealt with at Chief Education Officer level across the 3 local authorities at a higher level with NHS, and it's not something that's going to be let go of, I think, because there is obviously that need, and it's part of the ongoing neurodevelopmental specification. It's quite clear there that assessment's a key part of that, and that would lie with health colleagues.
But second to that, what are we actually doing to inform families that there's not a barrier?
So NHS have communicated to families who were part of the waiting list for that, if you like, but there's also communication going out more generally to all families from NHS across the Tayside area. I think part of the conversation has been about, you know, in full candour, some of the communications that had gone out before hadn't been perfectly well received because perhaps there hadn't been joined up in this in terms of the message that went out. So there's been some time spent to make sure that that message that goes out is clear, but also offers reassurance and signposting and guidance in the meantime.
Thank you, Billy Hen. Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you. My questions are separate, so I'll just ask one, then you can on someone else. I think you mentioned secondary quiet spaces. I was wondering if we're ever going to look at the actual overall environment within secondary schools, so that lighting shouldn't be excessively bright overhead and noise should be minimised. You should have softening things in the street or whatever, the main halls and so on. Are we going to be doing that, and if so, when?
David McCluskey, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's obviously a live concern, and I think to root that question, I would say that those environments that best support learners with additional support needs are those environments that best support all learners. Indeed, those approaches that best support those with additional support needs, the same goes. So that's the kind of starting point round about that. The piece of work probably that we've started taking on is through what's called Circle, and that's focused on classroom environment, and it talks about the sensory space that somebody's in. It talks, amongst other things, about that opportunity to make sure that where young people are engaging in their learning is appropriate and with their needs. I think there's a way to go with that one, in all honesty, Councillor Cuthbert. In terms of Circle, we're making good progress. All of our schools are engaged and actually have implemented the initial stage of Circle. There are 4 stages. Many have now moved on to stage 2 and some have moved on to stage 3. But we need to work with the totality of the system to move them on. I think the other question probably that sits alongside that is the conversations that we have with our colleagues in property when we're constructing new schools about lessons we have learned probably in the past with some of the school kind of constructions that we've had, and producing environments that are ASN friendly, in a kind of wider sense. So it is a live agenda. There is actual work going on round about it, but it would be true to say there's more still to do.
Yeah, I just was wondering if we could actually start incorporating it into the school improvement plan. I know that's mainly focused on educational learning and stuff, but I think environment should also be part of that, perhaps.
Yeah, just to say that does feature in many school improvement plans, but it isn't universally in all school improvement plans. I think that's probably a fair comment. However, it does feature in our education improvement plan. So while individual schools might not have that as an action, that's part of what we do in conjunction with them, moving ahead, given, to have a coherent improvement plan in a school, too many of their own priorities can crowd out what they need to do. So that's where we can lend and offer support.
Thank you, Councillor Cuthbert. Just very briefly to add that one of my visits to, I know you asked about secondary, and this was a primary school, which will remain nameless, but one of our rural primary schools I was in not so long ago, and had a wee tour of the school, and I was thinking about members of this committee, because the colours, whilst bright and colourful, certainly wouldn't have been appropriate for anybody with additional support need, and so I do think there is a way to go, and but we're learning all the time with it, I think. But it's a good question. Councillor Grant Stewart, please.
Thank you, convener. Speaking to teachers in a number of wards across Perth and Kinross, my perception was that they seemed quite excited about us moving these supports to throughout the whole wide community. Are my perceptions correct?
Fiona? David?
So the short answer, I think, is yes. It's pretty universally supported, and I think that probably tells us somewhere about where education's gone in the last 20 years. It's really hard to argue against having an inclusive education that meets the needs of all our young people at a place that's closest to their home. I think one of the pieces of work I've done since taking up post is visiting schools and talking to staff teams. So I think I'm on school number 21 at the moment. I've said I'll go out to them all, and we talk about this everywhere we go, because additional support needs and inclusive education are real life topics, because these are wicked issues to make the best out of it we can. So when this comes up, I can honestly say across 21 schools thus far, it's been universally positive. And that's not because staff are just saying to the boss what the boss wants to hear, because let me tell you, there's been some good challenge back to me as well about other issues, but not round about that.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Billy Hearn, please.
Thank you. My second question is on transitions again, but it's the other end this time, going from secondary to work or secondary to college. And you mentioned there that you're doing work with the Health and Social Care Partnership, and I wonder if that includes CALMS as well, simply because, and the reason I ask is I had issues with my son going from secondary to college, didn't stick it out. The reason being is that there wasn't any transition from CALMS to adult services, and 9 years later we're still battling trying to get that. And I just wonder if that Health and Social Care Partnership bit includes the CALMS side of it.
Fiona? Thank you.
Sorry if that was my fault. As a question developed, I suddenly realised I'm probably a slightly better place to answer it. And again, I suppose the short answer is yes. And we all work through wrinkles and imperfections in the system. So one of the fora that I sit on in my current role is the community planning partnership roundabout health. And that's one of the live issues that's there. You know, that transition between services, that transition in general between children's services and adult services. Now, obviously, you know, Aaron's got a responsibility in part of that area as well around the social work piece. And that health piece sits as a responsibility of health. But again, it's for us all as part of that partnership to make sure that that happens and that it's seamless as it possibly can be. So, you know, these are areas which are part of live and ongoing debate. And I think that is part of the ITM, the integrated team meeting process that we have in our schools, which is under review at the moment, again, just to tighten that up and make sure that we always have all the right players around the table to make those transitions as smooth as they possibly can be. Because you're correct to identify transitions is very often the place where if something's going to fall off or go wrong, that's where it happens. Transitions between services or transitions between stages.
Thanks, Billy Hearn. Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, my second question relates to the ISPs again in terms of the primaries. Do we have a timeline for the Kinross-shire primary ISP at some point?
Fiona?
We don't have any more concrete a timeline than we had previously, but we are continuing to work with our property colleagues to look at to bring forward an options appraisal in terms of that.
Thank you, Councillor Cuthbert. Councillor Colin Stewart, please.
Thanks, Convener. It was just as I was listening to Bailey Hearn's last question and the response, Mr. McCloskey. Out of curiosity more than anything else, are those transitions from school to work or school to college, are they do they happen at a fixed age, or is it age flexible depending on is it person centered? I think is what I'm asking. You know, so that it's for some people it could be at 19 or 20 or and so on.
And again, Councillor Stewart, I suppose the short answer is yes in terms of flexibility. The longer and more nuanced answer is about the range of partners that sit around about that piece. So we work really closely with Skills Development Scotland within their framework. We do a lot of work with the youngsters in our schools about their anticipated leave dates and destinations so that we can begin planning for transition as early as we possibly can. So we currently know, in terms of our fourth year cohort, I think the last time I looked at the figure, we had a 98% certainty in terms of leaver date, their anticipated leaver date, because things can change. And then what happens is that the planning for transition can happen at different times for different parts of that cohort. I think in terms of those young people who are perhaps get additional support need or having a bit of a multi-agency approach, that's picked up through integrated team meetings. And those integrated team meetings begin to morph into something more towards employability. Through the local employability partnership funding, we have employability workers that work with our schools, and they're really youth workers, but with that focus upon employability, so they begin conversations with their clients really early to make sure that, because that is exactly what can happen if you have, let's say you've got a young person whose attendance at school has been patchy, and perhaps we're not seeing as much of them as we saw before. They're beginning to miss those appointments with Skills Development Scotland. It's really important that a relationship is forged with colleagues in youth services that bridges that world from school to college or training or whatever the next step is. So there's a whole ecosystem, I suppose, round about that to make sure that we have the correct positive leaver figures that we get actually currently from our secondary schools, but probably more importantly, it's those 6 month and 1 year figures down the line so that where they go to sticks. So yes.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Grant Stewart, please.
Thank you. This is going to be one of my usual waffly kind of questions. There was reference made to the pupil support assistants, and we recognise right now they're a really integral part of the teaching team. They're going to have to be highly skilled and motivated individuals. Where are these staff going to be recruited from, and are we looking at retainment? Because I imagine it'll be a high energy job.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. It's a really good question, I think. Fiona, please.
So we already have a large workforce around that provide our pupil support assistant role, and you're right that there is a task that's always involved in terms of ensuring we retain staff. We do that through training them up by developing people's skills that they're able to feel that they're able to undertake the job and see the difference that it makes, and that supports us in terms of being able to have some retention. But we will always have people who will move on for their own life circumstances, and therefore we need to support new people to come into the workforce as well. So one of the other areas that has been developed this year, I didn't highlight it earlier, but has been to develop an induction programme that's provided centrally rather than through schools. So it's not to take away from the importance of being inducted within the school context of the individual school, but it's also to provide additional core training that staff will get at the outset. So that's part of the work that we're undertaking to make it a more attractive job, and to support people to get off to a good start with us. And we've also developed more of a progression framework in terms of the training that's available, building on some of the work from Education Scotland have undertaken to develop some nationally available training that's online that we can support people to undertake and to look at. But we also recognise that the discussion that goes alongside some of these training events is really helpful as well, because it's all very well and doing something that's online. Sometimes it's the conversations that need to happen to do that. So we're looking to how we build that into the opportunities for PSAs for next year. Well, sorry, I should also say that we also run training during 2 of the 5 in-service days are given over specifically to bringing our PSAs together. So we offer an opportunity to come together in one of our bigger secondary schools. So over the course of this year, we've had, in the 2 sessions that we've had, there has been roughly 180 PSAs that come together in Perth Grammar School to undertake a series of workshops that they've selected. So it's aiming to also be led by the interests and needs of our PSAs.
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Very much appreciated. If there's no more questions, there's nothing to formally approve here, but happy to invite comments at this point from about anything that we've heard this afternoon, or indeed from the verbal report. If anybody wants to comment on that, then stick a C in the box now, please. Bailey Ahern.
Thank you very much. As you're aware, this is a subject close to my heart, and I really welcome the work that's going on, and I look forward to the results from the work that Fiona told us about earlier. I'm also very keen to see what comes out of the scrutiny committee in terms of the ASN pathway. But overall and generally, I think we do very well in Perth and Kinross in terms of supporting our young people with additional support needs. And I look forward to seeing more ISPs coming up in the future. I also attended the Grief School to see that ISP and what the work that we're doing there. Really good. And I look forward to seeing the new ISP up in high school once that opens. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for those really nice comments, Bailey Hearn. We know there's a lot of work to do, but thank you for that in the meantime. And the only thing I would add to that, given that our scrutiny convener's here, it's not appropriate for me to sit in meetings because they're scrutinising our committee, but nonetheless I have watched a lot of the work from afar online and whatnot, and it's really good work and it's welcome. We certainly welcome that scrutiny, and as I said at the start of the meeting, this is really important to us, but we also really know it's really important to lots of elected members that are not sitting here at the top table, as it were, which is why we're very deliberately making sure that there's regular workshops, updates. It's important that we're legitimately scrutinised and that we get everybody's point of view here. So thank you for that. If there are no other comments, I mean, the only thing I would add in a broader sense is that I've also been at all the meetings where we've specifically an ISP, where we've had the consultations on the expansion. They've been really interesting. It's not plain sailing, that is for sure, but they've been really interesting. I think what I find from a lot of these consultations is that parents and stakeholders will come up with things that I certainly haven't considered or thought of, and indeed even the professionals sometimes maybe haven't considered or thought of, and that's, I think, the really important part of consulting. And I think what I've taken from it is that it's really important that we fit intensive support provision into the current estate and make it complement it and not detriment it. We can certainly do that, but that's what I've taken from it. Really interesting for all the important and challenging conversations that have been had at these consultations. I don't think there's a single person who's actually said to us not to do this, rather interestingly, and that's encouraging. Councillor Cuthbert, you have a comment as well, please.
Yeah, I was pondering whether I should or shouldn't make a comment. No, I think in principle we're heading in the right direction. I think the workshops are a great addition. I'm looking forward to the next one. I'm also very keen to see what comes out of them. It's all very well having a workshop, but it's the proof of the pudding is in the eating, if you like. I think these ISPs rolling out, excellent. There's still a long way to go in some things. I think identifying children's needs early is important, and I'm not sure we're getting that right yet, but certainly we're heading in the right direction. So well done to everybody.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cuthbert. And again, we do recognise that there's a lot to be done. When first became convener, I did say at a head teacher meeting actually that additional support need was something we were going to focus on. It would be a long and challenging road. I didn't quite realise how long and challenging that road was, but we're determined to travel on it nonetheless. But thank you for those comments. It is really appreciated. Thank you, Fiona, for the continued good work, and your staff as well. It is really appreciated. So thank you very much. We will now move on to paper 6, which is the Gaelic language plan, and that will be introduced by David McCluskey.
Thanks very much, convener. So this update provides details of the progress made to date and the commitments and actions set out in the Gaelic Language Plan 2023 to 2028. And these are based upon the 3 pillars of Gaelic: using Gaelic, learning Gaelic, and promoting Gaelic. We've been really lucky in Perth and Kinross to secure the services of Fiona Waddle, Gaelic Development Officer, who joined us in January 2025, and Fiona's with us today, sitting at the back. I'm happy to take any questions that members may have. Probably Fiona will be able to answer in more depth for those community-based questions, so she'll field those. unexpectedly this afternoon, the officer that leads in the education side of the Gaelic language plan's not available. So I'll answer questions where I have the knowledge, but I'll avoid waffling, and instead what we might do where I don't have the detailed knowledge is I'll make sure we get a written response back to members in those pieces, if that's acceptable to everybody.
Thank you, David. Any questions? Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Convener. Tap alive, Convener. Yes, just reflecting on the plan, and I welcome the report very much. It's a very wide-ranging, comprehensive plan that goes into a lot of detail about what's happening in the Gaelic world within Perth and Kinross. But earlier this morning, we were talking about the tourism strategy under E&I, and I noticed that there is reference in there to a Visit Scotland Gaelic Tourism Strategy Plan, and I wonder if there's an opportunity here to try and link these two things together, because I think certainly probably for a lot of our international visitors, Gaelic is a unique experience for Scotland, and there's an opportunity to tie these two things together, and I wonder if yourself or perhaps Fiona might be able to tell us a bit more about that.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Fiona, welcome again to the committee, and if you've got an answer for Councillor Duff, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Yes, I think there definitely is. Tourism isn't something which I have looked into in any depth just yet. I'm early on in this job, and I've been concentrating on the adult education part mostly. But definitely, tourism is a really important aspect for Gaelic development. There's obvious economic benefits to Gaelic which we could be tapping into, and it's something I'd definitely like to look at in more detail. And I've been already speaking to Bord na Gaelic about possibilities for helping businesses in the area to make the most of the opportunities from tourism.
Thank you, Fiona. Thanks, Councillor Duff, for the question. I appreciate it. Are there any other questions, sir? If there are no more, Councillor Duff. Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Thanks. Fiona, you're right. You're not being that long in it already. We've seen some great work being done from yourself in relation to contact with Gaelic groups and such like. 3 years ago, we had the Royal National Mod in Perth, and it was a great event, and I think welcomed by the residents of and the businesses of Perth for that matter, because I think it brought about £2.5 million, if I remember correctly, to the local economy. And I wonder, I'm sure it does. I think it did see a reference to try and bring a Royal National Mod back to Perth there, but I wonder where that features in terms of the work that you're currently doing. Thank you.
Fiona?
Yes, that's correct. That does feature in the plan, and it isn't something which I have worked on as yet.
Thank you, Fiona. We'll revisit that in due course, Councillor Duff, if that's okay. Councillor Grant Stewart, please.
Thank you. Convener, I was wondering, pupils that are taking Gaelic as a subject, are they more likely to take on another language?
David, please.
So in some of our school localities, in terms of what's called the 1+2 agenda, this idea of your native language, then an L2 and an L3. So in some localities, Gaelic is either an L2 or an L3. So, Gaelic's actually been picked up alongside some of the more kind of, trying to think of the right adjective, and I won't say it, but subjects like, for example, say French or Spanish, those European languages. So the short answer to that is yes, and then I think it's just about that clarity between some of our children and young people are learning through Gaelic medium. That is literally the medium of their education. So it's not like that standalone language piece. And some of our children and young people are actually studying Gaelic as a subject. So in the same way that perhaps when I was at school I studied higher French, they're doing national qualifications round about that subject. So it's just about that slight difference we have between those for whom they're going through a Gaelic medium education and those who are picking up Gaelic as an additionality in terms of the SQA suite of qualifications at the end.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Barrett, please.
Thank you, convener, and thank you, Fiona. It's clear from the report that a lot has been achieved in the last few months. I just wanted to check, there are references in the report to things having moved to the next stage of the plan. So does that mean after 2028, beyond the scope of this plan?
David, please, this time.
No, and I suppose in all clarity, Councillor, it was myself that wrote that, and it's just about it's about within this part of the plan. So there are aspects of the current plan 23 to 28 that we haven't yet really touched upon, and Fiona's mentioned one or two of those. So that was really signposting about where Fiona's work, and largely where I have pointed that out, it has been in terms of the work that Fiona does, where that will then evolve into like the next stage of the plan. So I guess what I was trying to do is signpost in a year's time when we're sitting here looking at the work that's happened, you can expect to see development in those areas that are signposted.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Duff.
Yes, on page 24, it talks about developing the Ardscall A9 project, the A9 High Schools project, to enhance the GME secondary school experience with peers. I wonder if Fiona or David might be able to give us some more information as to what that involves. Thank you.
I think that probably sits more under my aegis, and again, it's one of those ones that I'll not be completely waffly on it. I'll be able to give you an answer. The detail around about it I might have to provide later on. So the A9, the Academy 9 project that we have running in Perth and Kinross is for those schools who are, you know, along the line of the dualling of the A9, and I'm sure you'll know all about that already. It's a skills development, employability type approach that we've delivered in partnership with those companies that are helping to create that new dual A9 experience. And that's something that's actually happening not only in Perth and Kinross, but through every local authority that's touched upon by that. Part of that project is for those schools in particular for whom GME is what they do, is delivering that Academy 9 project in a GME context, so that once again those youngsters who are learning through Gaelic medium are getting the opportunity to fully engage with that Academy 9 experience through Gaelic medium.
Thank you, David. Thank you again, Councillor Duff. If there are no more questions, I'm just going to really very briefly move the paper formally, and in doing so just want to thank Fiona for her work so far. I know it's early days, but I think we do see a difference already. But also to Donald MacLeod, who's not here, unfortunately is unable to be here, but for his continuing work in the school sector. You know, my belief is that Gaelic is part of Scotland's culture, and we should be, whilst not be pushing it on anybody, it should be encouraged in the greatest possible way, and I'm pleased that this report does that. So I would quite like to formally move this paper, and I'll ask Councillor Carr to formally second it, please.
I'm happy to second the paper.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Any comments on the paper, please? Councillor Duff.
Tapalaich nach Kiram. Hamia Kurfalche an ahis seo ar plana Gaelic. Agus the torch tang do Viceger Bachlaske agus an Skiepa Eke. Son an Kuch oprach a skrivain seo. Am plana a torst teich do Vrosnachug agus Gian na Gaelic an an Piarst agus Kinross. Agus a Vrosnachug Muncher gus a Gaelic a Chlachkig. gus a Gaelic Yunsichug, agus gus a Gaelic agus a cultar ahartachug. A tor rutin a tachast an drasda, common Gaelic fiast, kosher Gaelic fiast or guhan fiast, agus kosher Gaelic operfiali, fish aha, mod unitil shirich fiast agus English an avius, folum Gaelic, kroliken agus bunyan arich, tachatis an bookbug Gaelic. An bliana, ha da chiet bliana aun vo chur Raiburst Armstrong a ciawn voor an shaw an shirich fiast, richele a chiet achler Gaelic san tul. Hashin ar brosnachug, gus a Gaelic a clechgug an conjeven, far a veel a Gaelic mar chuspar, agus hami an dochus gundo horvich laum shin a Genev and Jew. Convener, I welcome this comprehensive report on our Gaelic language plan and thank Mr McCluskey and his team for their work on this document. The plan supports the promotion and protection of the Gaelic language in Perth and Kinross and encourages our people to use Gaelic, to learn Gaelic and to promote Gaelic language and culture. As we can see from the report, there is a lot which is currently ongoing. Perth Gaelic Society, Perth and Aberfeldy Gaelic Choirs, Feist Taha, the Tay Festival, the Perthshire and Angus Provincial Mod next month, Gaelic education including e-school, play groups and nursery groups, Gaelic book bug events, etc. This year it is 200 years since Robert Armstrong from Kenmore here in Perthshire compiled the world's first Gaelic dictionary. The Gaelic plan encourages us to use Gaelic in meetings where Gaelic is the subject, and hopefully I've managed to deliver on that part of the plan today. Personally, I'll be competing with Aberfeldy Gaelic Choir in Oban, Aberfeldy, Aberdeen and Fort William this year, and we had the choir out singing at the Scottish Cranach Centre at the weekend. Convener, I'd also like to take this opportunity to welcome the Council's support for Gaelic through the budgetary contributions it makes to Gaelic medium education at Breadalbin Academy and at Goodleyburn, and its support for events and organisations such as the Provincial and National Mod and the FACE groups. Can I also thank Donald MacLeod, our Project Manager for Gaelic Development, and Fiona Waddle, our Gaelic Development Officer, for their excellent work they're doing in support of Gaelic as shown in this wide-ranging and thorough plan for the language here in Perth and Kinross. Convener, I welcome the increased opportunities to learn Gaelic, which this plan promotes, and I hope that many of our parents, grandparents and children, as well as our council staff and councillors, may make some effort to learn a bit of the language this year. Suas Lisha Gaelic, tap alive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff, very much for that. It's really nice that we have a Gaelic speaker on this committee. It's appreciated. Councillor Massey.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you for the report. I am not going to read this in Gaelic. I will just say it in English. Scots Gaelic lies at the very heart of Scotland's soul. Scots Gaelic is more than just a language. It is a living thread that weaves through the very fabric of our history, our music, our stories and our land. It is the voice of our ancestors echoing through the glens and over the lochs, carried in the songs we sing and the place names that dot our landscape. For centuries, Gaelic was the dominant language of Scotland. It shaped our literature, our laws, and our way of life. Through its use, though its use has declined, its spirit has never faded. And today, we are witnessing a powerful resurgence, a collective recognition that to preserve Gaelic is to preserve a vital part of who we are. Because language is identity, it is how we express our values, our humour, our worldview. When we speak Gaelic, we are not just using words, we are honouring the resilience of those who kept their language alive through hardship and change. Gaelic enriches our culture, it brings depth to our events, our education and our tourism. Events like the Royal National Mod held here recently in Perth show us that Gaelic is not just a relic of the past, it is a vibrant, dynamic force for the community, creativity and economic growth. It also opens doors. Bilingualism enhances our cognitive skills, fostering empathy and strengthening social bonds. When we teach our children Gaelic, we are giving them more than just a language, we are giving them a legacy. But this legacy needs our care, it needs our voices, our schools, our signs, our songs. It needs us to speak it, learn it and celebrate it. It's not just in the Highlands, but in every corner of Scotland. Let us not allow this treasure to fade into silence. Let us raise our voices in Gaelic proudly and publicly. Let us ensure that the future generations can hear the language of their ancestors and know that it is also the language of their future. I welcome the Perth and Kinross Council's Gaelic Language Plan 23-28 because it outlines a comprehensive strategy to preserve and promote the Scots Gaelic language and culture. In the words of a Gaelic proverb, broken Gaelic is better than dead Gaelic. Let us speak it however we can. Let us keep it alive. Tapala. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Massey. There's part of me quite pleased you didn't try and say it in Gaelic, to be fair. However, what you've said there, I think, was absolutely spot on. I had a couple of notes here for comments after. I'm not going to bother now because I think you've pretty much said it all. So thank you for that comment. Councillor Barrett, please.
Thank you, Convener. I just wanted to thank Donald MacLeod, Fiona Waddle and our Ambassador for Gaelic, Councillor John Duff, for all the work they're doing. And I wanted to send our best wishes to John and the Aberfeldy Gaelic Choir in all their upcoming competitions.
Here, Councillor Barrett. Can we agree the report? Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. We're done for the day, so thank you very much.